Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Boisterous coming to you with some Masters League Magnificence out of the map Ohana. Spotting up here in the top left-hand corner, we have HoneyBadger as the blue Protoss, and down here in the bottom right-hand corner is their opponent, PlayWithMe. Now, I understand this is really just Korean letters that, honestly, for all my information about Korean, could really just be a nasty swear word. However, I'm going to trust the person that sent this email in and just say it's PlayWithMe, because that's what they said. I really don't have anything else to say about that. Anyway, as far as announcements go, over the course of the next week or so, me and Kadoink will be going back and commentating through all of the other games of the SCL that we missed in our live commentaries. It's going to be quite a bit of work, and it's going to be very, very worky, I think. There's like probably 60 games to 60 to 90 games we haven't done yet. So that's going to be quite a bit. We have both of our players, of course, speaking in Korean, because this is Masters League on the Korean server, which, if you actually know it's good for you, you don't want to be there. It's not a nice place. They do it really hardcore over there. And we have both of our players going for fairly standard things. Nothing really out of the blue. HoneyBadger sending out a scout. An interestingly placed barracks. I'm not sure if this. I'm actually not sure why this barracks is placed here. It's kind of odd. It's in a spot where if the probe doesn't scout it, then it can be a bit scary. However, honestly, it's not far enough up that the probe is likely not to scout it, because honestly, the only way that you would not scout this is if you literally just came in, swung around the mineral line once, and then ran out. Plus, just the situation is that this barracks, even if it does finish, what's it gonna do? It's gonna pump out a marine and kill the probe, and then the Protoss players is gonna be like, oh, he doesn't have a barracks. Anyway, we have the probe coming up and scouting it out anyway, so it's really not that big of a deal. We have a forge going down for HoneyBadger before any sort of gateway tech, so kind of an interesting version of the Forge Fast Expand, where she's not building the forge down at the ramp. Instead, she's going to save that space for, say, something like more cannons or more gateways or something like that. But it's kind of an interesting play. It's something a little bit that you would never see. We have, oh, that's why he hit it, because it's Reapers. Oh. Anyway, if we look at HoneyBadger's vision, we actually see that she doesn't know that it's going to be Reapers. So yeah, that's a pretty good situation to be in as Protoss. Actually, I guess she can suspect it's going to be Reapers, because tech labs that early usually don't contribute to Marauders, and honestly, having just, one photon cannon like this basically protects you from Marauders. However, it does not protect you from Reapers, and we have a bunker going down along with a large probe pool. Actually, no, this is just a transfer. 5 probes coming down here. The SCV is gonna go down. Yes, it is. So that's kind of nasty. This bunker, there's absolutely no way it's going to finish, as this photon cannon has wrapped up. We have the Reaper, the first Reaper coming in to strike. However, it honestly looks like this photon cannon, the Reaper has a bit of forward information. It's going to be swinging around to the side. So it is actually going to be able to do quite a bit of damage, because if you look at the Protoss's base right now, they have nothing to fight Reapers. Absolutely nothing. The only thing they can really hope for and wish for is that these Reapers get caught out of position on workers, and honestly, it's Masters League on a Korean server. That's not going to happen. Or it's very... I would highly doubt it happening. And is it going to happen? Oh my god, it happens. Literally 4 seconds after I say it's not going to happen. And then a second one gets into it. Alright, well, this is the part where I just take a sip of my water. Because I was wrong about something by a lot. Both of those Reapers were handled completely incorrectly. This probe is just kind of sitting there. He knows what's going on. He sees the barracks, he sees it pumping out units, and he's going to run away. And the Reaper is pretty fast. I'm not sure if that probe knows what he got himself into, because that Reaper is like the Predator right now. Threw on his heat-seeking goggles, he's looking for probes, and he does not see a probe. Oh, now he sees a probe. And there he goes to snipe. Alright, that information. Oh, the probe does see the factory with that tech lab building, or does see the factory with the tech lab attached, so he does know that there is some level of siege tankiness on the way, which is of course a large amount of information to have at this stage of the game, because really that's a pretty heavy commitment into a tech path. And of course, that's easy enough to tell, because if the factory is churning out a unit with a tech lab on it, what else is it going to be at this stage of the game? It's going to be tanks. It's not going to be like Hellions or anything like that. And if it's churning out a unit, then it's not going to be swapping with a tech lab and going for Banshees or anything like that. Although I guess a 1-on-1 would be possible. I think it would still be just a little bit too awkward. So anyway, we have HoneyBadger just prepping up their front, getting those photon cannons, which they actually got a while ago. Getting the third base, which is kind of interesting in a game like this. I'm guessing he's going to go for some sort of highly mobile composition. However, against siege tanks, that might not be your best choice. I actually like people to go like Immortals versus siege tanks, because Immortals are actually very good at dealing with that heavy damage, because as soon as that tank hits them, like, the tanks waste all of their volleys of shots on the first 10 rounds of the Immortal. I don't quite remember exactly where I saw this play, but I saw one of the most ridiculous plays in a 2v2, where literally there was a giant siege. It was like a TT versus PZ, I think, and there was a giant siege line set up for the two Terran players. It was like 13 siege tanks. Protoss players sends in one Immortal, tanks every shot from the tanks before the tanks can reload and fire again. Zerglings are swarming the lines, and everything is dying. It was really awesome. And I really wish that I could see something like that again, because it was literally very, very impressive. We do have an SCV pull coming with this tank push. And do these tanks? Okay, they do have siege mode. I was going to be very depressed if they didn't have siege mode, because I never saw it researching. However, this attack is going to be pretty dangerous, and honestly, our Protoss player does not have a whole lot to deal with it. I understand it's only 4 tanks, but 4 tanks sieged up, still a lot of damage. Especially with these 4 SCVs here to repair. No, that one tank does go down. However, if you look at the rest of this army, ooh, whoa, they got 7 warp gates. What? That's a lot of warp gates. That's going to be helpful, especially with the tanks sieging up like this. Zealots are super effective if they can get into range of tanks like this, which they have managed to do. And of course, 2 tanks going down, and these Zealots are being super cost efficient. They're picking off SCVs, they're picking off tanks, they're completely destroying everything. So that attack was successfully deflected. Zealot meat shields, pretty good at this game. That's why you need to bring Hellions with those tank pushes, because otherwise you just get absolutely wrecked. Because tanks aren't very good against light units that have a 150 hit life. They're just not. Whereas Hellions are good against light units everywhere, no matter what. They don't even care. They just don't care. So anyway, we have this barracks floating down and completing the wall off at the natural. Now, of course, HoneyBadger has had the space up for a little while. It is fully saturated. But natural is less than fully saturated, but we'll let that go for a second. And really, they're doing quite good at keeping map control, making sure that they're mobile, making sure that their army remains mobile but strong. I'm kind of surprised to not see to have seen the Twilight Council so late into this game. Usually you see Twilight Council at like the 8-minute mark if somebody's going for this really heavy gateway build, because that allows them to get blink out fast and allows them to really research and upgrade. However, I think after seeing that attack bearing down, they just opted for way more units instead of a higher tech, which is something that, I don't know. If that tank push was like 3 tanks stronger, I think it would have done a lot of damage. Also, if it was like way better spread out, it would have done a lot of damage. Or if it just had any Hellions at all, basically. I mean, there were a lot of things that that tank push could have done that would have made it far superior to what actually happened there, because that tank push was kind of pathetic, to be quite perfectly honest. We do have the starport coming up, finally, so that's a bit of a late starport. 5 Templar warping in, that's a lot of Templar. Those are morphing into 2 Archons. We have Blink on the way, so, the general idea of the high-level player. Now, of course, versus Siege Tanks, I actually prefer Charge, but that's just me, because Charge lets your Zealots become Zerglings, and 150 HP Zerglings, pretty good against Siege Tanks. That's just what they are. It also kind of stops Hellions from being able to kite them super duper easily. I mean, Hellions can of course still kite them, because Hellions are extremely fast units. However, if you really look at it, the Hellions are actually going to be getting a lot less shots off, or a lot fewer shots off, and they're going to be doing a lot less damage to the Zealots in general. Plus, the really important thing that your Zealots are doing, which is sniping off the Siege Tanks, becomes much easier, because they can really just blaze past the Hellions, or run up, hit the Hellions once, and then run on up to these Siege Tanks and then just destroy them. That's generally a good thing. We do have Psionic Storm on the way, and it's at approximately 80 seconds out of 110. So that Psionic Storm is going to be finishing in a little under half a minute, especially if he chrono boosted it out. But it does not look like that's what he is going to do. We do have a lot of Zealots here for this army, especially considering the fact that he went for Blink, despite the fact that he only has 5 Stalkers. So, you know, a bit of a interesting choice there. Again, I would have liked to see Charge first, because it makes your Zealot Meat Shields way better at doing what they do best and also doing damage. However, with such a high Hellion count at this point, I think they might have made the right choice by going for Blink. Yeah, honestly, this is a lot of Hellions, which cuts into the tank count. Now, the tank count is still fairly large, but it's not nearly as large as it would be if he was going to say straight tank Marine, which kind of sucks versus Protoss, and I understand that. However, I'm just using it for an idea of how many extra tanks you would have, because all of these Hellions would be either tanks or Marines, and, you know, you wouldn't need this factory on a reactor. You'd probably have like 4 factories on Tech Labs instead of, you know, 5 factories, 1 on reactor, 2 on add-on, and 2 on Tech Labs. So you'd have, you know, an extra third of tanks, which would be quite effective. Now, HoneyBadger's army is becoming a much more Stalker heavy, and the charge is about to finish for the Zealots, so they are about to get the best of both worlds. This is going to be a +1, or this army is going to be a +1/+1 with basically full upgrades for all of the units in the army. Now, if we look, interestingly enough, there's a fleet beacon on the way. That's kind of a cool tech switch that you don't see a whole lot from Protoss players. It's just going for the air tech late game, because usually they go for the air tech early game and then they swap into the ground tech and the Templar tech and the Colossus tech late game. Graviton Catapult, you only get that upgrade if you're doing one thing, and that one thing is carriers, and you never see carriers anymore in this game, so I'm very excited. And we just saw the effectiveness of Hellions versus Stalkers. It's pretty nasty. And now we see the effect of Hellions versus trees. It's also pretty nasty. Those trees just got completely lit up. Anyway, this 4th planetary fortress is just going to get absolutely wrecked here. As those SCDs try to repair it, but the charge lot's just doing so much damage, and these Hellions are not in a good spot, but neither are those Zealots, because those tanks are right there, and they're ready to push on the door. Now, of course, this is kind of the spot where you want to be as a Terran player. You want this many tanks. This is a lot of tanks. That's how I would describe this number of tanks. However, we do have the mothership on the way. We have 3 Stargates on the way, and a hardcore tech swap into air units would be devastating against this force. Just absolutely devastating. Because if you look at this army, there's absolutely nothing in there that shoots up. And when you're fighting any sort of air composition, typically something that either shoots straight in the air or shoots up is a requirement. And really, after going mech, it's so hard to transfer into, you know, good stuff, such as the Marine or such as the Mass Viking. Maybe if you're fighting what you call it, carriers, but you know, it's just, it gets a bit awkward because you just have this giant ball of Hellions and tanks that is wasting all of your supply, but is generally useless. You know, this is a lot of tanks. I'm not sure if you guys picked up on that yet. And we have, yep, still just giant armies on opposite sides of the map. There have not been a whole lot of major engagements. These tanks are moving out yet again. This poor SCV got commanded to build the missile turret in the middle of the tank army, and you know, the tanks just didn't understand what that meant, so they just kind of sat there. Tank drivers and the Terran army are not the smartest people, especially if you play Brood War. Rock and roll. Those people were pretty awesome. And here comes the Protoss force, but I would not suggest engaging into these siege tanks. And we see something kind of interesting. This kind of looks like a TVP from Brood War. We have the missile turrets like in the army. The only thing he's missing right now is Goliaths. You know, just missile turret up your entire half of the map, and there the engagement occurs. But there's just so many tanks. You know, there's not a whole lot you can do versus this amount of tanks, except for tech swap in the air. That's kind of it. And I don't know why he's continuously reproducing on Zealots, because they're kind of just useless. We have the mothership here, So he's kind of just going to be waiting for energy to vortex, and then he's going to vortex this giant meaty core of tanks. But I'm not even sure if that's going to do enough, because you need to knock out a large portion of this army for these tanks to become manageable, and he just does not have the numbers to knock out that large portion, or he just does not have the vortex to knock out that large portion of this army until he has a second vortex, which is something that he does not have time to save up for, because his army is kind of getting caught into an awkward spot. We're probably going to see a vortex here. Now, of course, right there would be a beautiful spot for it, and there it does go down, and that's a lot of tanks sucked out of the fight. But if you look, there's still a ton of tanks on the outside. This Terran army this Protoss army is actually getting cleaned up quite a bit. He really needs to start pulling in those heavier tech units. He needs to start pulling in those carriers. He just needs to start building those, because they're going to be far superior. We have a lot of charge lots here that really needs to start engaging into these tanks, because they're kind of the final hope. If they can catch up to these tanks before the tanks siege up, they're going to absolutely slice through them, because there's just no splash damage and nothing even matters to them. They really do not care, as you just saw right there. Absolutely slicing and dicing apart the tank army, completely destroying it, and quite beautifully played by HoneyBadger. Now basically the final nail in the coffin yet again would just be going carriers, or just be going Void Ray Phoenix, basically going anything but more ground units, because PlayWithMe has the production to deal with ground units. That's the simplest way to put it. He has the production to deal with ground units. He does not have the production to deal with air units. He really, if HoneyBadger just switched to like 4 carriers would win the game, because carriers are surprisingly high damage units, and you don't need, they could be flimsy as paper airplanes right now and it wouldn't matter, because there's just nothing in the skies from the Terran player. There's what, 1 Viking on the map? Oh no, there's 3 Vikings on the map, sorry. But again, 4 carriers or even 3 carriers with +1 upgrades, they don't care about 4 Vikings or 3 Vikings or 2 Vikings. It just doesn't matter to him. Now, of course, he is starting to get that production for those Vikings up. So HoneyBadger's time is kind of like narrowing right now, because once those Vikings actually get into high production, and he gets a large portion of his army just being siege tanks and Vikings, then you're kind of starting to get into the danger zone. If we look at these Zealots, they're just kind of getting mopped up. I mean, they're doing a lot of damage, but they're only doing damage to Hellions, and Hellions don't cost a whole lot to Terran players. I guess they do at this point when you're at a situation where your main's mined out, your natural is almost mined out, your third base is basically the only source of income you have left. But again, he could just transfer an orbital. He does not need his orbital at his main once this mineral field is done in 45 minerals. He doesn't need it. So he could float that up, and he could move that out here, and he could just cross his fingers, set up a siege line, maybe like here, like he had earlier, and then just hope he can defend. However, if we look at the unit counter, we have 3 carriers on the way with 15 interceptors. So those carriers are building up their interceptors. They're getting ready to go. There's also another 3 carriers about to finish. And 6 carriers is a lot of damage going out. Just an absolute lot of damage. There's 8 interceptors, each doing 6 damage times 2, because they have 2 attacks. That's a lot of math. So 6 times 2, 12 times 8 is 80, 96. So each of these carriers is in theory 96 DPS. Now, of course, that does not take into account the +1 armor, but still, that's pretty significant. You just saw that one tank get completely knocked up. And here is how much these carriers care about the Vikings. This is kind of the micro that people were talking about when they talk about like carriers and Brood War, is the fact that you could pull that carrier back, and then it just wouldn't stop attacking. That was the awesome part, was that the carriers, or the interceptors, didn't fly back in, because you could trick them to stay out. But just look at the DPS from this army. He does not even care, and there is the GGs. I'm guessing, I don't really know Korean, like any symbols in Korean, but I think those were the GGs from PlayWithMe. So congratulations to HoneyBadger for winning quite an awesome game, and just showing us how much HoneyBadger don't care. So anyway, guys, if you want to watch any other Boisterous games, you can head on over to youtube.com/user/boisteroussc2. And if you want to send in any replays for me to commentate of your games, you can send them on into YouTube or boisteroussc2@gmail.com. Also, there will be a link to a Battle.net thread if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that to post to me. And keep an eye out for those SCL casts from me and Kedoink. They'll probably be going up, all week. And maybe even into next week. The finals will most likely be happening this Saturday, the 14th. The time has not yet been completely considered, but it would be nice for all of you to show up, cheer on your resident favorite team of the SCL division of the SC2 Clans Team League, and just should be there. Be awesome. Anyway, guys, this is Boisterous signing out.